Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another iTWire video with top international executives. Today I have with me David Belson. He is the Senior Director of Industry and Data Intelligence at Akamai Technologies. Welcome to the program, David.
Thank you. Good morning. Good evening.
Yes, it's midnight for me and 9 a.m. for you over there in New York. Now, you've just released the State of the Internet report, the Q4 version, but before we get into that, could you please tell us a little bit about your role at Akamai, and just for those who may be unaware, exactly what Akamai does?
Sure. I'll start with that. So Akamai improves the performance, the reliability, the scalability, and most importantly, the security of websites, web-based applications, and streaming media at scale. So you're doing online shopping, you are doing online financial transactions, you're watching a major sporting event, something like that. There's a really good chance that that content is coming from Akamai. The site you're on or the streaming media you're watching is associated with an Akamai customer. We do that by locating our edge servers in thousands of networks around the world, and basically helping to improve the performance by delivering that content from closer to the end user and stopping attacks basically closer to where they originate. In my role at Akamai, I've been here for almost 16 years, and my role as Senior Director of Industry and Data Intelligence, from the industry perspective, I'm responsible largely for the strategic competitive intelligence, so understanding what our competitors are doing out in the marketplace and understanding how Akamai is positioned relative to them. And the data perspective, I like to think of as thought leadership through data. So, with all of the content that Akamai serves and all the customers we have, the usage of our platform throws off a lot of what I call data exhaust. And how do we mine that exhaust to demonstrate a leadership position within the internet industry? So one of the key outputs of that over the last 7 years has been the State of the Internet report series.
And you've been doing that now for 7 years, and you've been the editor for 7 years. So, please tell us a bit more about the State of the Internet report and how you go about putting that all together, and a bit about the history of how that started and how it's different today.
Sure. So it started about 7 years ago. Our CMO called me into his office one day and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about how we could use the data that we have and demonstrate a real leadership position within the industry." And he showed me this short slide deck he had put together, and I said, "Let me go think about this." And I went off and talked to some of the folks internally and discovered that we had been collecting, archiving some of the data that's in the report. That's been in the report for the last 7 years. And started small. So the first issue was, I think, on the order of 15 or 17 pages. Grown now to 60 or 64 pages. And over time, content has come and gone, but things like the broadband adoption and the connection speeds have been in there really for the long haul. And that's really what we have found has been of greatest interest to the readers. And from a production perspective, so Akamai sees on the order of 2 trillion content requests a day. So our platform handles 2 trillion content requests a day, or in the order of I got to do the math the right way, 200 trillion over the course of a quarter. So we analyze all of those requests, and we look at and say, okay, where is this request coming from? What was the connection speed for this request? What kind of browser was it on? A whole variety of metrics, and we collect all that data, aggregate it up, and then at the end of the quarter, we can do quarterly averages and quarterly assessments in terms of connection speeds, or the percentage of connections that were above a certain speed. We can look at browser usage statistics, things like that.
You've been doing big data analytics before it became fashionable.
Before it was cool, yes.
Yeah. Now, we'll get to the rest of the world in a second, but iTWire is an Australian publication, although we do have a global audience. So how did Australia perform in the latest report, and how do we compare to previous reports?
Sure. So Australia had a fourth quarter average connection speed of 7.4 megabits a second. So that was up about 6% quarter over quarter. And an average peak connection speed, which we feel is a better representation of the capacity of a connection, that was just under 37 megabits a second, up about 2.5% quarter over quarter. In terms of how you compare to the rest of the region, Australia has fallen, I think, largely in the middle of the pack, has been ranked in the 40s globally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think certainly I know that's been of some concern over the last couple of quarters, but really when you look at it, I think these speeds are definitely acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And given the challenges in bringing broadband to a country as large as Australia, I think that they are reasonable. And I think really when I look back at the trends over the long term, which I think is really the right thing to look at, Australia has seen some fantastic growth in the key metrics over the last 2 years, 5 years, 7 years.
Well, I mean, we were supposed to be having the NBN, the National Broadband Network here, and it's supposed to be a fibre to the premises, connection, and we've had political changes. Now it's fibre to the node. So there's a lot of argy-bargy in Australia over how fast our connections should be. And
right.
But it's good to see that despite all of that, we seem to have been increasing quarter over quarter over the past few quarters. That's a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. And there can be, thankfully, we've seen Australia continue to climb over the last couple of quarters. Sometimes the countries will see a quarterly decline, generally a small quarterly decline. But really, when you put it in perspective of how things have grown over the last year to 5, that's really what you want to look at to really understand the kind of progress that's being made.
Sure, and I've had shared with me some stats, some key findings about Australia, so I'll have those in the article that accompanies this video, and of course we'll have the link to where people can download the State of the Internet report. But can you tell us, how about the rest of the world, in broad strokes, how's the US faring compared with last quarter, and other key places in Europe and Asia?
Sure. So if we look at the U.S., I apologize for pulling up some other data here.
That's okay.
So the U.S. has actually saw some mixed changes in the last quarter. For some of the metrics, they saw some slight growth.
Mm-hmm.
For some of the metrics, it saw a little bit of a decline. The U.S. has generally been ranked within, I'd say within the top 20,
mm-hmm.
somewhere between 10 and 20 for the key metrics over the last couple of years. Again, broadband has been a big issue in the U.S. as well in terms of how it's defined, where the FCC just changed that, just shifted the definition from 4 megabits a second down to a much more aggressive 25 megabits a second down. But over the long term, the U.S. has seen strong growth quarter over quarter as well.
Sure.
Strong growth over the long term. The quarter over quarter changes this quarter were not major, but over the long term, we've definitely seen great growth.
Sure. I mean, in general, ISPs and wireless providers, everyone's trying to deliver faster speeds for their customers, and we have advances in, DSL technologies and fiber technologies and backbones and all the rest. And I mean, Akamai obviously helps to ensure that content is closer to the edge of network, so people in different countries can get it faster, and all of that. So all of that is just a natural, continual evolution of technology.
Absolutely. I mean, and one other key piece to it, really, that I talk about is not only the availability. So what you just talked about there in terms of the technologies making it easier to do that, but also the affordability. It's great if you're going to roll out high-speed connectivity to a broad set of end users, but if you're pricing it in such a way that it's out of the financial reach of many of those users, then it's really not an effective effort.
Sure, and do you have the list of, I know it's all in the report, but who are the top 5 broadband nations at the moment in Q4 2014?
Sure. I mean, so if we look at the average connection speeds, for example, it's very similar to what it's been in the last several years, where we have South Korea, Hong Kong, and Japan in the first 3 slots, and then Sweden and Switzerland rounding out 4 and 5. So when you look at those countries, there's a number of similarities. One is that they're smaller and more densely populated, so it's a little bit easier to bring high-speed connectivity to a larger percentage of the users, subscribers. Another is government involvement. In some cases, there have been government subsidies that are associated with broadband rollout. In some cases, there's sort of more of an open access policy where if someone is deploying fiber, they need to make it available to all comers. Like a
wholesale access regime of some sort.
I'm sorry?
Like a wholesale access regime?
Exactly. So that helps improve that helps improve the competitive landscape
Yes,
there, where
absolutely.
you're not stuck with one or two higher price providers. So there's going to be an arms race in terms of driving price down and driving speed up.
Yeah. Now, we just had Netflix launch in Australia. I know the US has enjoyed it for many years now, but it's a big deal in Australia here. And of course, on Netflix, you have various 4K streams, 4K content, things like House of Cards. Is Australia 4K ready?
Australia is getting 4K ready. So our measurement, when we look at the 4K readiness metric within the report, what we did is we looked at the percentage of IP addresses from a given country that are connecting to Akamai with an average connection speed over 15 megabits a second. So when you talk to folks in the industry, you'll find that 4K streams require anywhere from 10 to 20 megabits a second. So working with our product folks, our engineering folks, we said 15 megabits seems like a reasonable threshold. And what we saw was that the percentage there in Australia was 6.5%. So that's up 12% quarter over quarter and up 73% year over year.
Sure.
So we'd say that Australia is becoming more 4K ready over time.
But clearly we have a long way to go. If it's only 6.5%, there's still 93% penetration, but that's to be expected with most countries anyway. It's normal. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, so yes, you're 36th globally in terms of 4K readiness. So you're certainly not at the bottom of the list at all. Yeah.
And just a question without notice has popped into my head. I've been reading various things about Steve Perlman's Artemis Networks, and he's going to Artemis Networks going to set it up in San Francisco. Do you have any thoughts about that? I don't know if you do, but it sounds very exciting.
It does seem interesting. I have read a couple of things about it, but I'm not familiar enough with the technology to really be able to comment in any meaningful way on it.
Yeah, well, it's another exciting development out of the US. It'll be interesting to see how the San Francisco rollout happens and how it works in stadiums. And, if it does deliver faster broadband for us all, maybe the world will jump a few steps up towards quicker broadband and more 4K readiness faster.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
It's definitely a technology that I'll watch closely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, given that Akamai has a key focus on security these days, what are some of the key security trends to come out of the report? I know you mentioned security briefly at the very beginning.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we saw overall, we have a number of different sources of security data. So we again saw attack traffic sourced in nearly 200 countries around the world, with China originating a significant percentage of that. That's been fairly consistent over the last 7 years. There've been a couple of quarters where other countries have popped into the top slot.
Eastern Europe is always a...
But by and large, we've seen China topping the list.
Yeah.
We saw port 23, so port used with Telnet, remote access technology, or remote access protocol. Top of the list of the one that was most probed. That can indicate that there are botnets out there that are looking for, in essence, open doors to systems and servers, and then trying to brute force their way in. We saw, in terms of the count of large-scale DDoS attacks that Akamai customers reported, we saw that total number roughly flat with last year. But there are a number of different ways that you can look at DDoS attacks, and going forward, we'll be rolling in some of the additional data from Prolexic, a DDoS mitigation company we acquired last year.
Sure.
But I think and then we saw a number of different attack vectors and toolkits that really came to the forefront over the course of the quarter. I mean, so I think the net there is that it's still ugly out there, and there's the bad guys aren't going away anytime soon.
No, the cat and mouse game continues as per usual.
Right.
Now, I always like to just change gears very slightly before we close up with a sort of a final question. But before that, I always like to ask if there's any particular advice that you've received over the years that's helped you where you get to where you are today, and if you could share it with us.
It's a good question. Good piece of advice.
Maybe something from your teachers or parents, or something from your mentors.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's
Saved by the Bell.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. A good piece of advice: turn the phone off.
Yeah, turn off the phone when you're doing an interview. I apologize for that.
That's all right. It's not live, but it's live.
One piece of advice I think that I would have liked to have received would be to I think, take some more risks. I think I've been, fairly conservative in a lot of what I've done professionally, and maybe putting myself out there a little bit more. I'm certainly very happy with where I am now, but putting myself out there and taking a few more professional risks would have got me further ahead.
Sure. Well, it's never too late, is it? So,
nope.
Yeah, and but I'm sure we'll be looking forward to your 8th year of reports and how they grow. So, do you have any final words for iTWire, the viewers and readers, and also for Akamai customers, the current and potential customers?
I think from a security perspective, everybody needs to do a better job of practicing good network hygiene. I think that in still too many cases, people aren't locking things down and making sure that their networks and their systems are clean. I think that more countries and more companies need to be taking a stronger stance towards adopting IPv6, especially as IPv4 run out is becoming more and more of a reality. And I think connectivity wise, I think we all really want to be at the top of that list, and I'm really excited that the Akamai State of the Internet report has become such a de facto standard in the industry for looking at that. But I think we also, in many cases, really get caught up in everybody needs gigabit connectivity and everybody needs to be super fast. And I think we just need to look at what can we leverage, what can we consume, and how much is fast enough. I'm not saying that we don't need gigabit connectivity, but let's work towards that instead of placing that as the only goal. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, people say instant gratification isn't instant enough, but if we could teleport, we would. We're just not there yet.
Right, and I'm sure as gigabit connectivity becomes more widespread, we'll certainly find more uses for it.
Absolutely.
I know personally, even with spouse and 2 children, we're not going to even come close to filling a gigabit pipe with what we do on the internet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that in not in the near future, I'm sure my kids will find some Minecraft variant that will suck up more and more bandwidth.
Yeah, or there'll be 8K streams or 16K streams that will help to deliver 4D or 5D. Goodness knows what's coming next. But look, David, thank you very much for your time.
You're
really
very welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you.